Hey everyone, Mark Edwards here with Jérôme Bérubé and Brad Allen. We're going to do a quick Q&A podcast. We did this last year. It's going to be a little bit quicker than last year's video because we've already done a top 32 prospect podcast, and quite a few of the questions that we got have been answered in the part 1 and part 2 of our top 32 ranking video. So we'll move on to some questions here. Like last year, I'm going to kind of double as host here and chip in with some answers. So first question, when comparing the elite with elite prospects, I recognize that you came to polar opposite conclusions with Gridin. While they see his potential more as a hardworking bottom line player in the NHL, you guys see immense boom or bust potential with him, but question his work ethic and compete level. How tough was it for you to find the right spot in your rankings with him, considering that you value compete level a lot? Okay, so I'll start with this. Let's see, where do I start here? I kind of have no idea how elite prospects came up with that scouting report. You would just need to ask them, I guess. I'm not sure I've ever disagreed with a scouting report more than I disagree with that take, simply because of our take is the polar opposite, as you've mentioned here. Our issues are with body language to compete. This is a high-end, skilled player. If they see him as a fourth-line kind of hard-working player, that's just polar opposite to what I saw and our guys saw in our viewings. So, yeah, this is one of the most talented players in the draft. The body language was terrible times. He addressed it really well. Talked to quite a few scouts, actually. Addressed it really well in his interviews about the body language question. It didn't go unnoticed by us or NHL teams. Obviously, it was pretty obvious, along with the compete issues. But the compete level, although it was something that we didn't like, the slight positive was it showed signs of life down towards the end of the season. And then to answer your question about the ranking part, well, these are always tough. It comes down to philosophy and how much risk you want to take, that sort of thing. For us, he came in at 25. That's kind of at the point where the risk and the talent kind of hit the threshold of too much talent to let him drop any more than that number as our 25th best prospect. Our scout, Michael Farkas, actually had him as an A player and would be willing to take him in the top 20. But as a group, the number we came up with was 25 on our list. So I'll throw it to you, Brad. Do you want to just chime in on Gridin at all real quick?
Sure. So one thing, just in case if none of you listeners get time to listen to our top 32 breakdown, one clear indicator of his talent level was the fact that when you match him against Boisvert in the head-to-head in terms of neutral zone entry rates using their handling skill set, like Gridin washed Boisvert. It wasn't even like Gridin's one of the most efficient puck handlers in this draft. He's a remarkably efficient puck handler, super talented. There's games where he effortlessly scored 2 goals, ended up with 3 points, and it was like clockwork for him. So it was the off puck play. I told Mark this during our meetings, is that there's a bit of Dominic Bach, and that's a scary prospect for us. It's a player we missed on, and it has everything to do with just the willingness to engage physically and the willingness to forecheck correctly, the willingness to try to win battles along the walls. Those are areas where Dominic Bach really struggled, and there's times where Matvei Gridin has shown the same type of skill set in a negative way. That said, as Mark mentioned, it is a bit more up and down than Bach. It was like you're just left always wanting more. Whereas with Gridin, it was, that was actually better than we've seen in the past. Oh, there's that bad again, right? And so it was just more inconsistent. So yeah, we definitely think of him much more as like a high skill player that is very unlikely to develop a secondary ancillary skill set that would have him in a supporting role or a grinding role at the NHL level.
Jérôme, anything you want to add real quick?
Real quick, just a frustrating player to scout for us because we do really value like the compete level. Like his body language was bad this year. It did get better a bit at the end, but it's funny when you dig a bit with more info on him. What we've seen in games is a bit of the opposite of what some people who knows him about his practice habit is like he practice hard. He's very demanding from his teammate in practice. So a bit of the opposite of what we saw most of the year on the ice, like in actual games. So that is very interesting to me. That he's a very he's a guy who practices hard, and I feel like long term that should help him, fix a bit some of his issue in games about the compete and also the body language.
Yeah. And just some of the details I got from his interviews that I can't share. It's obviously more private info, but I really liked some of the detailed information I got on his interviews. Excuse me, some of his answers. So that played into it a little bit as far as where we could rank him. So I'm going to move on to the next question. This question is on Lindstrom. How do you see Lindstrom to, say, a Cutter Gauthier or other recent top-rated power forwards? Just real quick for me, I really like there's a lot of layers to Lindstrom's game, but I'll just throw this one to you, Brad, and you can take this one.
Yeah, so it's a great question. Cutter Gauthier and Lindstrom definitely have some similarities. They're both big. They both skate really well in open ice. They can both run over players. That said, Cayden Lindstrom's definitely the much more ferocious, tenacious, competitive player, I would argue, at the same age. The thing with Cayden Lindstrom that's kind of more difficult with the evaluation is when you look at like the top five in general, he was the one who dominated the first 2 months of the season. Then he let up a bit. Then he got hurt. So it's one of those things where there's no shiny new toy syndrome with Lindstrom, which I think is why some people are questioning a bit more like, why do we have him this high? But the truth of the matter is that he's not a dumb hockey player. He held at center. You don't hold at center if you're a dumb hockey player. And then with his playmaking rates, yes, they can be inefficient at times, and yeah, he can cough up pucks, but he can also make advanced passing plays that you just simply can't make if you're not an intelligent hockey player. And I would argue he made more of them than Cutter Gauthier at the same age. So Cutter to us honestly looked more like a hybrid winger by the end of the season, where Cayden Lindstrom, we never had a discussion. It's like, well, what happens if he's not a center? To us, we really think he will remain a center. So yeah, it's an interesting comp, but Lindstrom definitely more sandpaper, definitely better hit rates, definitely more tenacious, and is I would argue a better, maybe even as good, if not a better finisher long term than Cutter Gauthier, and that's really saying something because obviously Cutter has a heck of a shot.
Yeah, I talked to a couple scouts that think Lindstrom will end up being a winger, which is why they don't quite see him at number 2 like us and have him just a few spots down, which is fair enough. That's their opinion. Obviously, we think he can stick at center, and that's one of the reasons that he held and stuck at number 2 overall. Next question was, what's the rationale for Connelly being out of the first round? So speaking just about the on-ice product, I've just kind of been saying this since my first viewing of him. I just think he plays the game by himself way too much. I don't think he's an exceptional passer, really overly creative. I think he came in about 158 pounds this season, and then, if my memory serves, went up to 161 weighed in at the combine. So that's a pretty low number. Can he still play? Obviously, yes. But that's another concern here. We're June of his draft year, and he's 161 pounds. So I think he has some nice flash and dash, but maybe a little bit of the substance is lacking. I just mentioned layers for the last prospect, and I don't think there are too many layers for Connelly. Jérôme, do you have anything to add to this one?
Yeah, very quickly. I think Connelly is very, very flashy. Like, obviously his hands are really good. He looks really good if you watch him on highlights. If you watch like a YouTube highlights, video of him, he looks fantastic. But like you said, the playmaking is not always there. I mean, on the power play it's there, but 5-on-5 is a bit more of an issue for us. The shooting, that's a guy who shoots the puck a ton. Like we call it a volume shooter. Like many games this year we saw attempt like 15 shot on net and not very successful at it. So like is he going to be a real sniper that translates to like 30, 40 goals in the NHL? We don't think so. And there's a lot of selfish play from him too. So just not our type of player, to be honest. Like we respect the talent, but there's still some question mark as far as like how that's going to translate to the NHL. And we might be wrong, and we'll admit it if we're wrong. But that's ranking him outside of the top tier two was I don't think a lot of was not a huge debate. I think amongst our staff here. So I know, Brad, do you have something to add here?
Well, I mean, he had one game where he had 24 shot attempts, and I thought he was bad. If that happens, I mean, that's usually not your type of player. I will say this though: if he is to burn us, it's because he learns how to open up the ice and use his vision more than he currently does. He does show flashes of advanced playmaking, and it was towards the end of the season, just before the U18 and into the U18, where he made passing plays I didn't know he could make. And so if he can broaden his horizon, so to speak, and stop trying to attack one-on-one, stop being so individualistic. He almost plays very like a Russian style of hockey at this stage. He almost plays like he's in the NHL. So if he can just calm everything down, quiet the noise down, and allow the game to breathe and open up options, he does have technical playmaking ability. So that's where there is a bit of concern with our evaluation. If he's to burn us, that's what's going to happen. Is he's going to quiet his game down, stop attacking, and really open up the ice and find his playmaking options at a higher rate than he currently does.
Yeah, and he's all over the map with team scouts. I spoke to about him. Some guys had him pretty high. Other guys didn't even have him on their list. So it'll be interesting to watch and see where he ends up coming up for it on draft day. This was kind of a follow-up, if memory serves, from the same person. What about Hage? Why wasn't he in your top 32? He was fantastic from January on. Jérôme, you want to take this one?
Yeah. I mean, he definitely has like some talent. Obviously, his second half of the season was, he's one of the best scorer in the USHL in the second half of the season. But there's some like a bit of a Brad Lambert in his game as far as the skating goes, the ability to rush the puck, make zone entries. So there's some value to that. But once he's in the O zone, I felt like there's some, things missing in his toolkit for me. The IQ was up and down for me. Sometimes there was some pretty good passing play from him. Sometimes just didn't really see his teammates on the ice, or didn't want to pass the puck to them. And the second thing I would say is the compete. We're very high on compete, and felt like this was a guy who did a lot of skill play out there. But as far as like line driving, compete level, like we like there's an expression we like is driving the bus. So we don't really see that from him. Like the hard skills, they were not there for us, and that made him drop from our list, from outside the top 32. So I guess that would be my answer why he slipped out of our top 32. Mostly the compete, the tenacity was not always there for us.
Yeah, and our scout Mike Farkas in meetings actually compared him to Connelly in quite a few similar traits. They shared a few things as far as traits go. Next question was, how did you arrive at a 6th grade for Catton's hockey sense? And was it an intense debate with your scouts? So no, it was not an intense debate. I can answer that real quick. Interesting player, really talented player. I think the 6. I mean, there's a lot of subcategories under our hockey sense grade. Decision making being a part of it. So Catton was a player where you would see some highlight reel plays that jaw drop impressive, and then some kind of like what the F type turnovers and just blind hope plays. I'm not a real fan of hope plays. I guess no scout's a real fan of hope plays, but they drive me crazy. I can't stand when there's the blind hope plays to the slot that quickly turn and go the other way. I will say in his defense, he didn't exactly have a whole lot of help on his team. That's something I mentioned several times in our meetings. But I'm going to let Brad continue on for this question. I know he's got some thoughts on Catton and in particular, you know, the difficulty of assessing the hockey IQ, because there's some real strengths within the other subcategories too.
Yeah, so it's his primary assist rates are incredible. So you look at the primary assist rates and it's like, okay, no, he's got to be an incredible playmaker. But then you peel back the layers, you get to 25 viewings of him. Over half of them, he's a zero-sum player, meaning that yeah, he might score 2 goals, but he's the direct result of 2 goals against because he's throwing pucks away and it's going back in transition. So that there's like it. I always equate this to Johnny Gaudreau. When Johnny Gaudreau's not playing well, he's usually a zero-sum player. And that was the same with Berkly Catton. That's the issue with these smaller. And we think of this player as a winger. So smaller wingers, when they're not being dynamic, not being efficient, well, they're liabilities because defensively, the Catton, like Johnny Gaudreau, like Mitch Marner, they can have some difficulties there. Especially when you evaluate it long term and think playoff hockey, right? So. We think Catton's going to be one of those players that's more suited to wing. And one of the reasons we think that is because when you look at him defensively, like it's not so much even to compete. Like I've seen the kid throw himself in front of pucks, even head first. I've seen him do some pretty crazy things actually from a competitive perspective from time to time. It's mostly he doesn't know what he's supposed to be doing. And there's a real lack of instinct for understanding the center position. So if you look at Jetlichenko, Konstantinius, the coach doesn't have to come to them when it comes to telling them how to play about the puck, how to support defensively, where they're supposed to be positioned for an exit pass, right? This kid does. This kid needs all the help in the world. Like Berkly Catton has some difficulty with it. So that did not change right up to the end of the season. So you look at what he's also very good at, and it's his neutral zone game. He's an amazing neutral zone entry machine. That's where like he really is elite. And in order for him to bring out that quality, it would make the most sense for him to be a winger because then he doesn't have to play as deep in defensively in his own zone. And it's one of those situations where he's not going to project to be very big. So if you're not going to be a very big player, you better be really, really strong for your age category, like Matthew Savoy out of Buffalo was, or Konstantinius this year, where he not only held against men, he was cross-checking them out of balance. He was being able to deal with players who are 6'4", 220, 30 years old, draping on him. That Berkly Catton does not project to be able to do that. So, yeah, we think of him as a winger. We feel his instincts are that of a winger. And when you look at his playmaking ability, yes, it's dynamic. Yes, it's very high-end at times. And yes, his primary assist rates are phenomenal. But he also makes way too many passing errors to think of him as some sort of elite hockey sense. It's very similar to me with Adam Fantilli. I heard nothing about Adam Fantilli's hockey sense last season until we started discussing it. And then all of a sudden, Adam Fantilli's not as intelligent as we thought. Well, Adam Fantilli was moved to the wing in Columbus for a reason. It was because he was struggling at center. And that was one thing that we projected to be a possibility. We thought that Adam Fantilli would actually make a lot of sense on the wing. That's how we feel about Berkly Catton.
Next question. Why does Artamonov fall out of top 32 for you? He's a guy that seems ranked all over the map. KHL statistics seem decent for someone of his age. Not sure if it's due to his size, boom, bust potential, or another area of his game. Thanks. Yeah, not a real pure goal scorer. A little bit inconsistent this year. Kind of more of an energy guy. Nothing really outstanding elite in his game, but no real stopper either. But Jérôme, you going to take more of this question? Expand a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, he's not in the top 32, but we still have time for him. Like, it's not like we think he's a no draft. Really strong start for him in the KHL this season, and it really slowed down after like maybe November. Like the first 2-3 months, I thought he was pretty good, and we thought that this might be a first rounder when it's all said and done. Didn't really happen that way for him. His play cooled off in the second half of the season. Mostly the skill level. I think I think he's a smart player. I think he's a solid skater. He competes hard. Good forechecker. There's nothing really wrong about that player. Just the skill level, just probably is going to limit him to be more of a depth forward at the NHL level. Maybe maybe he can get to be a third liner at some point, but that would be as high as I would go as far as projection goes for Artamonov. But we have time for him, but just not a top 32 guy for us.
Okay, next question. Who are some of the biggest boom or bust players? These a couple of these guys have been talked about in our top 32 video that you can check out on our YouTube channel as well. Yzerman Gridin, Letourneau, just outside of our top 32, St. Andrews College player. He's not talked about in top 32 because he wasn't in our top 32, but huge player with some skill. Biggest thing lacking was some drive, some compete, inconsistent. But if that turns around, there's definitely some boom possibility for him. Brad, do you have one to add?
Yeah, for sure. Jesse Pulkkinen, like 6'6", defenseman, tons of skill, tons of talent. Doesn't know how to play in a structured environment as often as we like to see. But if things go really right, then he could really boom because he can drive possession. He can do everything. He can dominate with his frame, and he's just so well rounded when he's playing up to his ability. It's just all about the consistency rates and understanding risk and understanding how to play in a structured environment.
Jérôme, you got one to throw in?
Yeah, I got two. I mean, we have already talked about a bit about those two guys, but Connelly and Hage to me are either going to be top six forward that make us look bad, or they likely not going to play in the NHL. So that would be my two players I choose here.
Okay, next question. Who are your fave players not in your top 32? Okay, so why don't we each mention a player we like? I'm going to go with Jacob Battaglia from Kingston. Kind of came on my radar late fall, if I'm remembering right. I mentioned to our guys here that kind of reminded me of a poor man's Jason Robertson. And no, I don't think he's going to be Jason Robertson, but just from the standpoint of some size to him. Skating is his weakness, same as Robertson at the same age, and continuing on here. But really smart player. Battaglia's got really good hockey sense. He's got skill. He was buried on the fourth line from the old coaching staff. The new coach came in, recognized his talent, pushed him up the lineup, and gave him some opportunity, which you can't do anything without opportunity. And he really started making the most of his opportunity and started putting some crooked numbers on the board and showing the hockey sense and the skill. So I would have liked to have seen him. He would have pushed up the ranking even more for me if he just had a little bit more compete, a little bit more drive. Did he, was he lazy? No. Did he not compete? No. But if he just pushed a little bit more, I think if he pushed and compete a little bit more, the skating would have looked a little bit better. A little bit more in the one-on-one battle department would have looked a little bit better. So that's an area for me to continue watching him. I think if that area improves, he could really take off. But yeah, this is a player that I'll be interested to watch next year and also just see kind of where he comes off the board. Brad, you got one here, fave player that was not inside our top 32.
Yeah, for me, it's Oleg Mastrenko. I know for the vast majority of you, if not all of you listening to this, you're like, who is that? Be honest with you, I don't even know if he gets drafted. It might not. But in terms of like his play style, one of the most ferocious competitive players I've ever witnessed. Our nickname for him was Captain America because he plays the most North American game we've ever seen for a Russian. Kind of a quote we took from Vasily Pokolzin's profile. He's just he barrels over goalies. He barrels over his own teammates. He barrels over the opposing team. He'll hit anything that moves. And he has a really unique skill set. He's actually an incredibly advanced playmaker, despite being a power forward that sees red a lot, which is super rare. He was the captain of CSKA this past season, and he had a tremendous curve. It's just the question is, if a team drafts him, can they give him real opportunity? Right? He's more of a depth forward. He doesn't fit a top six description, but can you see him play extremely well as a third line player? in a playoff series, I can, and that's why I mentioned him. I think he's got a ton of hidden value. So for me, Oleg Mastrenko got to get the pace of play up. He's got to get his 3-step area quickness and acceleration going, and he's not the most consistent player. So if he can upgrade in those areas, the skating, the consistency rate, he really has a chance to be something and be one of those Russian names called where everybody goes, "Who's that? I don't know who that is," and it might end up playing one day.
And Jérôme, you got one to throw in here?
Yeah, I'll go with Leon Mugly, who played in the NLA in Switzerland this year. Played a regular shift most of the season in a really good league. A league that has really improved in the last few years. So spoiler alert, he's number 33 on the list. So he just missed our top 32 by one spot. Almost broke my heart when he dropped to 33 on the list. Well, I like this player. He's smart. He's dependable. We think he's going to play, 10, 12 years in the NHL. He's got he's smart. He works hard. He's got some pushback in his game. He's not flashy, but he can move pucks. I think it was a bit tough getting a real sense of his offensive upside this year, playing in a men's league. Often young defensemen and playing in a men's league like this, the number one thing they want to do is not make any mistake on the ice, because if they do mistake, they're not going to play. But when we saw him in international tournament like the U18 or the U20, we saw a bit more, upside offensively. Is he going to be a properly guy? No, but I really like this player. I think he's really underrated. It would be a lot easier to rank him in the top 32 if he was 6'2", 6'3". So he's 6 feet, so he's a bit, of an average sized defenseman. But when we saw the pushback in his game, the physicality, we were a lot more confident about his ranking and his potential. So Mugly is the guy I would choose as my favorite player, not in our top 32.
Okay, and last question. Brad just gave me this one right before we hit the record button here. So I'll let him take this. What player has the longest development curve? Go ahead, Brad.
Well, there's definitely a couple. So Kieran Walton fits that description. 6'6", player super inconsistent. Didn't get a ton of playing time, but it's one of those situations where you look at Justin Brazeau out of Boston there, what he did in the playoffs and how long it took him to develop. There is a lot of crossover and similarities. Even their point production at the same age is very similar. So you look at long term and you look at what Kieran Walton has shown flashes of: his play driving instincts, his handling ability, his toolkit, which is, I'd say, argue above average for his size, and his puck protection skill set. It's just, there screams a player there that if things go right, everybody is going to be extremely surprised and impressed with him long term. The other for me is a Belarusian who I'm sure, again, most of you are like, who in the heck is this? And that's Arsenii Marchenko, 6'6", right shot defenseman, youngest defenseman in the draft, captain Belarus's U18 team. He's incredibly raw in some areas, but there's a very good skills base to work with, and it's one of those situations where if he gets drafted, which I do think he will, if he can get pulled over to the CHL and then get put into a real environment where he can develop, there might be something very real there. So those would be the two. It's usually, when it comes to this question, it's almost always players who are extremely large and need a ton of time to fill out their frames and get that coordination caught up. And then it's usually also players who are like Arsenii Marchenko, where they're brought into a system from like Belarus Vashaya, and then pulling them out of that system and putting them in one that actually really simulates more of a North American and NHL feel. So for my money, it's those two that everybody's going to be like, don't really know who that is. And then in 6 years, watch out, if things go right, everybody might find out who they are.
Okay, so that's all the questions we have for this year. But if you check out some of the other recent videos on our channel, you're going to find a 2.5 hour long goalie video for this year's draft with Brad and Jérôme. And then Brad and Jérôme also did 2 parts of our top 32. So they talk at length, they go into depth on all the 32 players in our top 32. And then you've got this one. We'll see if we add another video, but Jérôme's going on vacation tomorrow, I think. So that'll be a week there. I got some stuff to do, but we'll see here. We got a little bit of time before the draft. But other than that, yeah, hit all the YouTube stuff, hit the like, subscribe, and everything. That'll help us out. And you could buy a black book. That would really help us out. Print version on Amazon is selling well. The PDF selling really well. Thanks to everybody that's already supported us. We appreciate it. Can't do it without you. And I guess that's it for today. We'll wrap it up. Thanks, guys.